Good morning, everyone. I think we can start. My name is Joanna Orłoś. I supervise the projects at the European Network Remembrance and Solidarity. And here with me, there are 6 people who will be presenting their initiatives, their projects, their research, all in the area of remembrance, education, memory, but they are also quite different. So I guess we will have interesting questions afterwards, and of course you will be able to ask your questions as well, and we are looking forward to it. Let me first very quickly introduce the speakers. Iratxe Momoitio, Cecilia Badano, Pavol Hardoš, Lukáš Holata, Olha, Mukha, and Sebastian Zilm. And we will start with the presentation of Iratxe Momoitio. Iratxe studied philosophy and literature at the University of Deusto in Bilbao and completed her postgraduate training in museums, cultural management, and memory policies. She has directed the Gernika Peace Museum since its foundation in 1998. Her research focuses on the bombing of Gernika, the Spanish Civil War, and memory studies. She publishes internationally, coordinates exhibitions and projects, and actively participates in global museum, peace, and memory networks. Iratxe, the floor is yours.
Good morning. It's a pleasure. Thanks to the organizers to invite me to be here. Okay, so I will briefly present the work that we do at the Gernika Peace Museum. Here you can see the image of the museum. This museum was founded in 1998 and wants to make the visitor on 4 questions. What is peace? What happened during the moment of lack of peace during the Spanish Civil War and the bombing of Gernika? What is the legacy of the survivors of the bombing? And what happens nowadays with peace and human rights, not only in the Basque Country and in Spain, but all around the world too. So the museum tackles those themes in 3 different moments. At the beginning, we started with more history and memory-focused museum. Then from 2003 to 2018, we have like 2 main subjects to work on, history and memory, of course, the Spanish Civil War, the bombing of Gernika, etc., and peace and human rights. And the last year, since 2019, we are more focused again on history and memory. Of course, peace and human rights is part of, Peace and human rights is part of our exhibitions and other activities, but not so much focus on that. We develop different things. We have like 3 technical departments. One is the directions, the projects. Another one is the documentation center. And the third one is an educational department. And the educational department has several activities, many workshops, many activities with children from 4 to whatever it is. 99, it can be a child too. It depends on how do you feel yourselves. And for example, we have this workshop on fake news because, of course, talking about the bombing of Gernika, there has been 2 versions. The real version, it was that it was a bombing done by the German Legion Condor and Aviazione Legionaria Italiana. And the version that was kept for more than 45 years, it was that it was an incendiary attack of the Red before leaving the city. So for all the dictatorship period in Spain, nobody could say that it was a bombing. That's why we work with the teenagers on those issues. The fake news, how the news were manipulated using the press. Concerning this issue too, for all of you that you don't know much about Spain or the Spanish memory laws, it was not till, I would say, till the year 2000 that the memory issues and history related to the Spanish Civil War issues started being worked in Spain. Before, it was a complete silence. You have to imagine that till 1979, there were not democratic elections, more than 45 years dictatorship with a complete silence. So people could not say what really happened. And it was more the grandchildren who started to ask their grandparents, where were you, what did you do, etc. And it was in 2007 when the first memory law was established. And then there was another second democratic law in 2022. So something quite recent, and something, the second law is entering more the subject on the curricula, because till now only the students that are 14 or 17 study something about the Spanish Civil War. For them, it's not a very common thing. So sometimes when we ask, do you know when the Spanish Civil War happened? Some of them say 1980. So imagine that there is not... So in Spain, we have 17 different autonomies. And since the first general memory law in 2007, there has been different memory laws for each of the autonomies. Nowadays, the situation is that 8 autonomies has their own memory or democratical memory laws on, as you can see, starting in 2007 in Catalonia, and the last one in 2023 in Canary Island. There are 3 regions in which the memory law has been suspended due to the political changes and has been called in different ways, like there has been called nowadays conciliation laws. There are another 5 regions that don't have any memory law, and another one that is in between because of the political changes. So, as you see, one country, many different perspectives on the memory of this period. Here you can see a map with the different communities and the memory laws. Of course, in the case of Gernika, the fake news, disinformation was started since the beginning. Here I have met some of the newspapers that talk about the bombing of Gernika with different perspectives. The terrible destruction of Gernika by the German Condor Legion, the incendiary attack of the Reds to Gernika before leaving the city. So different versions for the same fact. And since the beginning, since 1937, Franco decided to use the propaganda using Gernika. That's why there were several exhibitions, temporary exhibitions in different parts of Spain, in Burgos, in Sevilla, saying how the Red has destroyed Gernika and how he will rebuild this city for Spain, you know. And here you can see some images. And so fake news is not something new. It's not something of the 21st century. And here I mentioned too the dark tourism, or the tourism of memory, how in 1937, 1938, 1939, during the war, there were several excursions or roads, one to the north, in which they stopped in Gernika to see the devastation of the Red putting fire of it. So it was something that it was done already on those years. And of course, in 2014, the Basque law of memory was established under the new institution that it's called Gogora, the Memory Institute for the Basque Country, and Gogora has some goals to do with this memory law. For example, elaborate a dossier on all those people that died by the vulneration of human rights, make a census of the victims, try to exhumate all the mass graves that can be in the Basque Country, make the homages to the people that die, and design or mark those places of memory, and Gernika is one of them, and try to tackle the things of the DNA to identification of people, and of course, if they have to put some money or indemnization, do it too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iratxe. Cecilia Badano holds an MSc in Communication Science from the University of Amsterdam. For over 5 years, she has been dedicated to connecting younger generations with the history of the Second World War at the Liberation Route Foundation, a growing international network uniting people and organizations committed to preserving the cultural heritage, memory, and meaning of the Second World War. There, Badano drives communications and events while working alongside her team on youth and art projects, remembrance, itineraries, and professional networking initiatives. Cecilia, we are looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you, Joanna. It's really a pleasure to be here today with you all. My name is Cecilia Badano. I work at the Lviv Foundation. The foundation is a European network organization dedicated to the memory of the Second World War in Europe. What we do is kind of difficult to explain in a short time because it really lies at the intersection of different disciplines. But today, with my presentation, I would like to tell you a little bit about our network because I think that's the impressive part of the work of the foundation, and about our multi-perspective approach because it links quite well with the symposium topic. Before diving into our multi-perspective approach, I just would like to show you a slide with a few information about our network. The foundation started in 2008 as a regional project in the Netherlands, the Liberation Route Europe. Today, the Liberation Route Europe is just one of our projects, but over the past years, our scope and our network grew to the point that today we are a properly international organization. We have offices in 7 European countries, so not just in the Netherlands. However, I'm based in the Netherlands. Our network counts more than 350 partners and members, including museums, cultural institutions, memorials, cemeteries, cities, and regions. And they are all located in around 15 European countries, and we also have some connections in Canada and in the US. We work during our projects with many professionals working with the heritage of the Second World War, from historians, volunteers, guides, but also people working at municipalities. And what they have in common is the desire to make sure that the local stories don't stay isolated, but become part of something bigger, become part of an European dialogue. Because of this diversity of voices and disciplines that we connect, the multi-perspectivity has become very fast the foundation of our work. The goal of the foundation is really to become a bridge for those institutions that want to learn from each other and collaborate, while always allowing space for local sensitivities and difficult conversations. We don't have the goal to create a unified or a unique narrative over the war, but really to foster dialogue over memory, which links well with what was said yesterday during the panel discussions. What we notice in our projects is that something very interesting happens along the way when a transnational organization come to work together. What we have at the end of in a project or in an exhibition is not really a collection of national stories sitting side by side, but you often end up with stories that transcend the borders. You get stories about fear, about loss, about resistance that really tell something about the universal experience of wars. I included a few slides, just 2 slides to show you some of our projects. I don't really have time to dive into them, but if you are curious, please let me know. I would love to tell you more. Our project really goes from public-facing activities to reach younger audience, but in general the public, to capacity buildings for professionals such as yourself working with the cultural heritage. I'm just gonna skip to the next slide because, as I said, I don't really have time to go into deep in our projects, but I would like to highlight one of them. You can see on the slide one of our most current projects that is called Art of Remembrance. It's funded by the European Union under the Creative Europe program. And I think it really illustrates well the multi-perspective approach that is at the foundation of our work. Thanks to this project, we managed to put together and found 4 art residencies from 4 artists from different countries in Europe. And they had the chance to visit 4 partner institutions, remembrance sites, and during their art residencies, they had the chance to talk with guides, talk to volunteers, talk to publics, meet the communities, but also to access archives, do research, and to create artworks. The results is traveling exhibition. You see some pictures here of some of the artworks that really invites the public to approach World War II history and the themes covered by these artworks with an open mind through different artworks, different lenses. What I think is very interesting from this project is that the artworks that have been created by these artists, who of course had total artistic freedom to what to create, is that they really cover some topics that were not really the most obvious considering the remembrance sites they went to. Just to give you an example, they went to the Bastogne War Museum in Ardennes, and instead of focusing on the Battle of Ardennes, all the people that fought, more the military history, which would have been the obvious choice given the nature of the museum, the artist, a French artist, decided to focus on the traces left by the war in the forest, on the trees, and then he made a whole reflection about it. So I think this is, we are very happy with the multi-perspectivity that this brought, and we're very grateful for our consortium of 6 partners to have developed this project with us. And the exhibition is opening next week at the Sibir Memorial Museum in Poland, so if you happen to be in the area, I invite you to visit it. And just in conclusion, oh, sorry, I go back to another slide. Yeah. I want to link to what was said yesterday. We do feel that history is increasingly polarized and becoming politically instrumentalized, and the war history in particular is often getting nationalized and oversimplified. And in this context, we think that cultural institutions really have a big responsibility, which is not to create consensus or a unified narrative, but really to foster and encourage dialogue. Shared memory does not really emerge when everyone tells the same story. I think we all agreed on that yesterday, but it really emerges when people like yourself are willing to sit down together and listen to each other. So this is what we're trying to do at the foundation, to create this dialogue, and this is also what we are trying to do today. So thank you for the organizers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Pavol Hardoš is an assistant professor at the Institute of European Studies and International Relations, Faculty of Social and Economic Sciences, Comenius University in Bratislava. our host today. His research interests focus on democratic theory, ideology, and the epistemic aspects of democratic politics, including questions of expertise, conspiracies, and the social accreditation of truth claims. He has published in Politics and Governance, the European Journal of Political Theory and Intersections, among others. Pavol, please join us with the presentation.
Thank you very much. I can still say good morning because it's 3 minutes until noon. So good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm a bit of an interloper here today because I'm a political scientist by training, and so I'm not really involved in memory studies, but I do think that I have something to say about the relationship of conspiracy theories and memory politics. I basically come here to talk to you from some perspective of conspiracy theory studies, right? The idea of how do we study conspiracy theories as a phenomena, and how do they relate to our politics. Now, I have two questions basically here. Why do people fall into conspiracy theory belief? And what memories are we constructing, and how do they relate to conspiracy theories and disinformation? And I think actually that in some sense these two questions are connected. What we talk about when we talk about our past, what we talk about when we construct memories, when we construct the past as something that is utilized for the present, actually also talks to people's involvement in particular conspiracy narratives. Now, you might think, okay, well, this is a bit too much. What are you talking about? I think it is a mistake to think about conspiracy theories as something, or disinformation in general, as something that is simply, you know, epistemically wrong, right? Of course, most of conspiracy theories are somehow factually defective, right? Or that they are somehow involved with fake information or incorrect information or weird interpretation of facts. But it would be a mistake to basically try to figure them out as an epistemic phenomenon. They are, first and foremost, a political phenomenon. They serve certain purpose in our political communication. They are political myths, they are political fantasies. They are politically expedient stories of power, of who is the winner, who are the losers, who gets what, when, and how, or in some cases, who did get something that they didn't deserve, right? Conspiracy theories are, I don't need to remind you probably, narratives that try to figure out how certain events happened because some evil forces, some evildoers in the background planned them to happen for their own benefit at the expense of everybody else. Now, these types of narratives are, of course, very common in politics, right? And when they become, in some sense, popular, or when they become the dominant discourse, it tells you something about the underlying political situation. They wouldn't be so popular, they wouldn't be so catchy for the general audience if already there weren't some, you know, anxieties, feelings of distrust, feelings of victimhood, that these narratives that can tap into and sort of like ride on. So at the micro level, you usually see people being victimized, either truly or at least they perceive that they have been victimized. You can have various reasons for people experiencing anxiety, distrust. These can be compounded by identity fears, questions about identity, about who we are, where we are going, what is going on to us. And at the macro level, of course, you will have memory politics, myths, and politically utilized narratives or elite-used narratives that try to depict some situation where the politicians will come in and say to people, yes, you are the victims. Yes, people are out to get you. Yes, things are really as horrible as you fear. So, in some sense, conspiracies work really well with something that we call victimhood nationalism, right? The idea that if history is presented to the people as basically a series of losses, series of harms, injustices, where people have always been at the where history has always played with the particular nation as this sort of perennial victim, where powerful evildoers have always done harm to the nation, where there are hidden foes everywhere trying to do evil things at our expense, these types of narratives will, of course, work very well, especially in nations that have really experienced historical trauma, like countries in Central and Eastern Europe, that we know very well about past persecutions and injustices. And if you go to any country, they can, name them just like that, at the top of a hat. So, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, we have this sort of double heritage. Not only have there already been present certain anti-Semitic and conspiracy narratives before communists took over. Once communism took root, you saw communist propaganda use also various conspiracy narratives, trying to scapegoat certain enemies for whatever failure has happened actually in these countries. So what we see is this sort of double heritage rearing its head after the fall of communism, where conspiracy theories haven't really been taboo, haven't really been something that is at the fringe, but have been utilized continuously by political elites. And afterwards, in the last 35 years, we have actually, suddenly realized that, actually many people and many politicians find it really expedient to use similar types of narratives again and again. One example that, touches on almost all of Eastern Europe in some sense are, for example, conspiracy theories of the anti-gender political right. Various illiberal right politicians will tell you that there is a plot by not communists, but neo-Marxists or feminists or liberals, that they are trying to subvert our beautiful nations, our Christianity, our way of life. That whatever, LGBT rights politics you see, or whatever gender equality policies you see, that they are part of a sinister ideological plot that is akin to communism, right? The memories of communism and memories of past injustices are brought up again and used as a support for today's political narratives that try to invoke, the communist past and past sins and past injustices to raise up today a fantasy of being surrounded by vicious enemies who are trying to do the nation injustice again. So what we see is that such political myths work with the past very effectively, and it basically comes to us who are involved in some way, especially to you who are involved in some way with memory and memory politics, is to figure out a way how to diffuse such narratives, how to perhaps make this type of victimhood nationalism less potent of a force that can't be then used by politically calculating persons. And in the, perhaps last 10 seconds of my allotted time, I would also like to promote myself for a moment. I'm sorry. If you're interested in conspiracy theories and if you're interested in the research into conspiracy theories, I would like to highlight a recent publication that is actually not recent but forthcoming in the fall of this year from a research consortium that looked into conspiracy theories in the European digital sphere, where we looked at several countries and how conspiracy narratives are being used differently in various countries and how the very fact of digitalization comes into play here. So thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Pavol. Now I'll ask Olga Mukha to present her work. She's a cultural analyst, philosopher, and expert in international and crisis communication and memory studies. She is the head of Educational and International Department and the Territory of Terror Memorial Museum, co-founder and board director of Resilience and Reconstruction in London. She has curated public projects such as Dialogues on War, Unseen Force, Lost Childhood, and Wounded Culture. Mukha has worked for UNESCO and PEN International. It's not your present.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's mine. That's mine. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, here are some slight changes with the name and gender, possibly. Thank you very much. And memory, words, facts, disinformation, and the Politics of Remembrance. And I'm navigating and juggling here two different hats. And let's start from disinformation, one as a part of Resilience and Reconstruction think tank based in London. I had the pleasure to visit the lovely workshop by Ursula and colleague today morning. Thank you, Conrad, to make it possible. And that reassured me that disinformation is finally not seen just as a tool as propaganda, but an infrastructure, actual infrastructure of war. And this is how I would like to show you how it works. Last year, we, with Resilience and Reconstruction, decided to run the field research on the disinformation, basically towards Ukraine and Russia, which in the UK, and how people perceive and change in the Ukraine situation, how they change in their opinions about Russia, and we found out quite disturbing things, which made us direct pass to Westminster, who taken our report as a basis for work also on inner affairs, because it appeared that disinformation is not only and foremostly affecting the perception of Russia war on Ukraine, but the UK democracy itself very much. And I'm really glad speaking after Pavol, because one of our control group was actually the conspiracy theories thinkers. And that was very interesting, because we presumptuously initially thought that, okay, who's gonna be? That maybe home-based mothers or people with some maybe particular level of education. But what we found out was very disturbing, because there were no one single person among the group of civil servants who would not deliver us very juicy piece of disinformation. And they appeared to be one of the target audience for those attacks as well. And we couldn't undervalue their influence of those people who are making decisions on a daily basis. Sometimes maybe not so obvious on a state level, but on a society level, that's quite important. And about our context, that was very much, and when we were asking how you are sure, how are you thinking about this thing, we found out the social media world reality amplifier, that most of people just have a feeling, the system one response, and then they try to run their own research. And they are aware of those so-called 6 sources proof, so they are finding 6 quite random links, which are just confirming their vision and their views. And then when you are trying to find some proofs, especially through your social media thread, the algorithm serves you with more and more proofs of that. And it's quite easy to start believing that. I had this experience myself, very funnily, because we were joining and running research on the far right and Tommy Robinson March. And I had to follow their accounts in social media until my colleagues were quite disturbed. Because after a couple of weeks, I was like, well, okay, maybe those guys have a bit to say. You do not, even if you are approaching this very rationally as a researcher, you do not register how the consummation of information change your perception. And so we were asking, we run over 20 focus groups, and we were asking people, so what is a fact, in your opinion, then? And that was quite striking, what we learned from that. Something that does not feel subjective, and they would absolutely come with the very subjective opinions. Something that confirms my emotional feeling, and some were very honest about that. If it makes me feel good, it's good enough for me to consume it and recognize as a news. Something you can see, feel, and touch seems to be quite relevant on a positivistic level, but then when it comes to something bigger than touchable stuff, then it goes to the very complicated level. And something that gives simple answers to complicated questions, this is where people were very much eager to get those simple answers, and something that feels unsaid or banned. There was quite repeated position that if you see something that appears in a TikTok and been taken down within the next 4 hours, that can be a truth. That it is. And then you go to mainstream media and check if they talk in opposite, that's definitely a truth. And this is how we created this narrative funnel of propaganda-aligned content, that how it amplifies that a lot of people positioning themselves as truth seekers. And here was one moment in a morning workshop which made me internally laugh a bit, because there was this exercise to check something on Wikipedia. And whoever comes from my region, Wikipedia in Ukrainian and in Russian is very much manipulated. It's rewritten because it's open source. And when you're Googling in Ukrainian, you very often get in the Russian answer, which is way far from fact-checking. And rather with my students, we are running fact-checking on Wikipedia and trying to find more reliable sources. So real facts of war are, especially now, I feel a bit jealous that when you all talking about the remembrance practices, about how to do it from the distance, because we are in the middle of this war, right? And those real facts of war are very challenging to document, they're difficult to prove, and they are unpleasant to deliver. Since the full-scale invasion started, even if I live in London over the last decade, I perceived myself how it's to be the most uncomfortable person in the room, delivering something what is not so nice to talk about, what is not nice to listen. And this is where it's a really good moment to switch to the museum context, which is another hat of mine, and where I think that museums in a new era just becoming something what I would call the reality check. Then when museum has this luxury of a slow memory, when it's not so easy to change as it's easy to manipulate through social media, and I think this is a bigger and bigger responsibility which comes from there. But here are also very much of the challenge in it, because, for example, you can see some basic facts. Those are over 2,500 objects of cultural infrastructure damaged or destroyed. But, for example, UNESCO has verified damage only less than 400. And it's based on satellite imagery. And we keep talking that Russian war on Ukraine is the most documented war in the whole history. But then I have a question, and so what? And it changed very little. That's a problem. Even if you have all the documentation, then it's still, as you could see, very challenging to get it proved. This is, for example, Odessa National Art Museum that I was about to open my exhibition there in a few weeks, and before, that was day before their anniversary, it was hit by Russian missile as a part of deliberation and preservation and protection of Russian culture, one of the most preserved narrative. Those are pictures from the western part of Ukraine, which is somehow perceived to be the safe part, right? It's from Lviv. That's also one of the museums. And this is what can happen every day or every night, and you never know what's going to be the aim. Obviously, aim's supposed to be the military objects. I don't think that the Shohavich Museum in the university can be treated like that. Maybe not by us, but differently by Russian. This is one of the great and very painful example of manipulation of memory. That's ancient city of Chersonesus in Crimea, which used to be one of the best perceived. But now, that's not AI-generated picture, that's a reality. This place doesn't exist anymore. This is this kitschy palace where Russia starts their Russian Empire roots and Ruski Mir basis and foundation there, now in Greece ancient history as well. You can be surprised, but it's not so difficult to create this narrative within. Then this is why the remembrance practices a vaccination against the propaganda and disinformation. Here I have a hilarious example for you that changed, that happened recently on the 9th of May. There was a demonstration for 9th of May, or Victory Day, and there was a little Russian activist rally which were organized to celebrate the Victory Day. There were three guys that was in Augsburg in Germany. And I think that that's the most hilarious trolling campaign which I seen over the last very long time. They joined 3 Ukrainians, just came from Munich to Augsburg, and they said, we can help, we are the designers, AI specialists, we can prepare posters. And they did. They prepared posters with pictures of Stepan Bandera, Maluk, and the Ukrainian writer Mykola Khviliovy. They just designed them slightly in a Soviet style and given them random names. So this Russian rally was holding those pictures and with all the following narratives about Banderivtsi and all the Nazis. And you should see their faces when they met the Ukrainian rally with the very same faces on their posters, but signed slightly differently. This is a great example which shows that if you have no memory, this is so easy to manipulate you. You just slightly design it in a particular style, and the crowd believes you. And if we previously thought that disinformation is that the government or state wants people to think some particular way, the Russian strategy is different. This disinformation as an infrastructure, they make it impossible to trust anyone. This is how it's easy to push through any narrative. What we are doing about this in Ukrainian museums, it's one of the preservation practice, obviously, trying to digitalize all the processes, all the collections, all the premises, because obviously it can be damaged, as you could see with the previous museums any moment. It's hosting in Western Ukraine museums and galleries from the occupied territories and frontline. This is a director of Lugansk Ethnography Museum who had to run away from the occupied territories, and she only could find her son, her passport, and this parachute of Russian troops. That was the only 3 things that she was able to deliver from the occupation. That's the only thing which left from her house, for example. One of our projects is called Wounded Culture. This is where we are recording in 3D, this virtual reality that you can walk through the museums with the different backgrounds. For example, Ohtirka was massively damaged on the front line. Trostianets was occupied and was also damaged, but slightly different way. You can walk through those museums which are not out of reach and then see how it was before Russia came and how it changed. This is one of those, I know that here's pretty much people in the audience which were interested in the childhood topics. This is one of our projects as well. And this is strikingly repeating the same narrative from over 100 years ago. This is a lost childhood, and we were running this report on an oral history basis, recording testimonies from people which were deported as kids to Siberia and Kazakhstan, and then were returning back. And I can't tell how much all those histories are the same now. There was one of my favorite witnesses, Pan Stepan, he's in his late 80s. And when I was recording him, and he said, oh, you know, when the war started, I was playing hide and seek on a cherry tree. And it was a very human-like story. And 2 years ago, I was recording a 9-year-old guy from Kherson, and the boy said, when the war started, I was hiding on a cherry tree. And that was probably the first time in my life when I had to stop interview and just go out to take a break and take a cigarette, even if I'm not smoking. Just because those narratives, those stories, those words were totally similar 100 years after. This is another challenging thing to document. That's another exhibition I was curating and happy to share more. It's about the nonviolent resistance on occupied territories of Ukraine. This is very difficult to document, but I think that if we lose this moment right now, it will never come back, that momentum. And this is also a very challenging story about the, how memory and how the changing of mentality and how this solidarity people in occupied territory can feel or sense, or let's say how it can keep them in our on our map. Because what I absolutely hate about this when it's called like occupied territories, but forgetting that those are people. And memory is more about people than any objects. Thank you very much.
Now I will invite Lukáš Holata. Lukáš Holata is the lead author of the virtual reality educational simulation Gulag Prisoner, designed to help younger audience understand how totalitarian systems function and to strengthen democratic resilience. He was a Maria Skłodowska-Curie Fellow at the University of Exeter and completed the International Visitor Leadership Program at the U.S. Department of State in 2021. He currently works at the Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes and Charles University, both in Prague.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, you skipped me, right? By mistake. No, don't worry, it happened to me all my life, you know. Dear colleagues, according to instruction, I try to be as simple as possible and also as brief as possible. So 5 minutes is my goal. So we will see if I will succeed. So I'd like to introduce the topic, remembering totalitarianism in the digital arena. Specifically, I'd like to present our attempt to build democratic resilience through immersive experience. Yesterday, it was mentioned several times that preserving historical memory is critical. It's very important for our present and also for our future. And especially it's important when we talk about totalitarian systems and democratic backsliding. Additionally, it was mentioned that education is very important. Education is the key, especially. Educated young generation is the key. But it's not easy task. On the contrary, it's complicated. So I'd like to expand these two aspects in my presentation. And I'd like to demonstrate how we build historical memory through experience. And on the picture, you can see one of the situations in our virtual reality educational tool that's called Gulag Prisoner. So we created game simulation that every who is interested, every student at school, who can become, for a few minutes, a Gulag prisoner and experience the repression. And of course, it's the result of a very long project, and I have no time to talk about that, so we can talk about it later. So let's continue. This picture is horrible, but I try to express two critical threats for young generation, especially. The left one, we talk about it several times here. It's the fading memory. So, young generation lost the direct connection with totalitarian regime in the past. And it resulted that democracy started to be taken for granted. So people are just not aware about that. And the right one, the right picture, express the current digital arena. Many current studies pointed out that algorithms, especially in social network, but other web platforms, are very dangerous for our society because algorithms have the power to lock us in chambers. So we know how it works. We have only the same information and not the objective information. This creates a large space where disinformation can spread extensively. And there are other studies pointed out that there is the increasing number of young generation that they are willing, they are not worrying about democracy, they welcome maybe the effective wave of rules. So these increasing numbers are really, really dangerous, really surprising for us. So let's see what about educational system. My experience is from Czech Republic, so I'm not sure how is the situation in your countries, but Czech educational system still fails to address these social vulnerabilities. And how the image express, there is still very strong focus on memorizing, remembering on a huge number of facts, definitions. But here is the critical question. How do memorizing help with understanding? And when we talk about totalitarian systems, we really need especially the understanding how totalitarian systems operated, how they work, on what principles they were based. So as a result of this passive rote learning, we still have a lack of critical reflection among young generation. So this is one of the solutions, and we return to the virtual reality and our educational tool, Gulag Prisoner. So I can return to Hannah Arendt and her concept that concentration and any kind of camps are laboratories of totalitarianism. It means that how totality works is exactly in the camps, but it's real brutal, it's condensated, it's bizarre, absurd, so everything is there. And this can be used in learning. This can be a very powerful concept in learning, because when we reconstruct and recreate Gulag camps, we can much more easily explain the core mechanisms of totality. We can express the essence of totality, you know, every aspect, violence, total control, etc., etc. So we can easily decoding how totalitarian system works. So in our reconstructions, we created 5 narrative scenes, and the user can experience the everyday life briefly during few seconds. He can experience the repression, and what I mentioned before, he can better understand the core principle of totalitarian system. And this is my final slide. So let me summarize my main message. I think that personal experience, and in this example made it possible by virtual reality, can actively shape and build and protect historical memory. I think there is still room for creating any kind of engaging educational tools. And the goal is evident. We need to, or we should try to translate complex history and capture the attention of young generation. And in this case, make the mechanism of totalitarian system clearly understandable. So the ultimate goal for our project was to increase society's sensitivity. So by experiencing how freedom is destroyed and what is the result of that, young people could learn to recognize the early seeds of authoritarianism and the subtle mechanism that weaken democracy today, you know, the issue especially for Central Europe last years or currently. So this our virtual reality tool is the way how we turn historical memory into active democratic shield as it's expressed on the picture. And that's it. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lukáš. Sebastian, the floor is yours. Sebastian Zilm was born and raised in Berlin. He studied politics and history in Berlin. Today he works for the Robert Havemann Society, where he develops exhibitions, events and public programs that connect the history of opposition and resistance in the GDR with contemporary debates on democracy and human rights. His work focuses on archives, civic engagement, and international exchange with dissident movements.
So, oh God, it's really deep. I hope this works with the sound. Thanks for the invitation to ENRS and to the possibility to present the Robert Havemann Society here in Bratislava. I have no slides, but I think I can sum up some points which are important for our work and stress some projects also without the presentation. The Robert Havemann Gesellschaft, which I'm working for, was founded in 1990 by dissidents of the East German opposition movement. Through the archive of the GDR opposition, we preserve today the largest collection on opposition and resistance against the communist dictatorship in East Germany. Our holdings include nearly 2 kilometers of documents, over 1 million photographs, objects, banners, posters, and other personal papers and materials from the dissidents in the GDR, which are focusing on the opposition movement. These archival materials form the foundation of our work. Based on these sources, we develop exhibitions, event publications, and other educational projects. But our work is not only about talking about history, but also about asking what these experiences mean for the present. So how do courage, protest, and civic engagement emerge? And how can freedom, democracy, and human rights be defended? As a civil society institution, we do not see remembrance as a closed chapter of history, but as part of a current social and political debates. So if we are organizing events, every time the materials from our archive are the foundation, but we look to the future and always to the history to other countries. We had recently an event with an Afghan artist, an exhibition from her, and talked about art as an articulation of dissidents. And another event was, for example, a film event with films from Hong Kong and Taiwan. And they share, the people who were portrayed in these films share the same stories like the people from our archive. So they share the same hopes, the same wishes, and also often the same repression history. So this engagement for the civil society and human rights things got no borders and no time. Also in Germany, we can observe how simplified and emotionalized historical narratives become. Democratic institutions are being equated with experience of dictatorship, historical contexts are reduced, and the public debates are becoming more polarized. These developments are intensified by digital media, fake news, AI-generated content. Our response as Robert Havemann Gesellschaft to this are original sources from our archive of the GDR opposition, civil society spaces for the discussion and critical debate, and positive stories about democratic structures and positive role models for democratic activism. Archives preserve not only facts but also contradictions, individual experience, and social complexity. Original materials and personal testimonies can provide an important response to digital simplification and disinformation. At the same time, we want to show, especially young people without their own experience of dictatorship, that social change can begin with individuals. The story of opposition and resistance teach not only historical knowledge, but also experience of courage, responsibility, and democratic self-efficacy. We believe that strong civil society structures are a key for democratic and resilient societies. Spaces for exchange, participation, and critical debates make societies less vulnerable to authoritarian narratives, polarization, and disinformation. Archives can take a crucial part in this cultural resilient infrastructure. Because archives do not only preserve the past, they help democratic societies remain open, resilient, and capable of solidarity. Thank you. Take my sign.
I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, it works. Thank you very much for all this very, very interesting presentations. And as you have noticed, the topics are very different, although they, of course, have many things in common. So it's not an easy task to think about a question that I will address to everybody here. But let's try. And I suggest that after I ask this question and we have a short conversation trying to answer, to find some good practices, perhaps I'll give the floor to the audience because I'm sure you may have individual questions to our presenters. And I think we will most benefit if I give the floor to you, especially that we have some time for that. So while I was listening to the presentations, and quite a lot of you touched the problem of education and people living in their own bubbles, algorithms guiding their choices, their opinions. And you, Lukáš, gave this advice on using less traditional methods in education to help young people to get their knowledge about totalitarian systems. But I hope I will not sound too provocative. I've been wondering, what about traditional methods like literature, like testimonies of witnesses that we can use? Perhaps, you know, they are as much as powerful as the games. What do you work with in your projects, in your research, in your museums, memorial places, to help young people to get to know the weapons that totalitarian, authoritarian systems use?
Difficult question, because sometimes youngsters are very used to other kind of more audiovisual things, you know, and more playing issues, you know, like games. But you don't want to be doing things that are boring, like sometimes school, but you want to do things that are effective. But where is the line, the red line, that makes you think on that? Because sometimes I have the feeling that they visit, for example, the museum. In our museum, we have a room that recreates a house of Gernika the day of the bombing. But we always have to tell them that that happened. Is not a real room nowadays. It's a real room in many, many places all around the world that happens, but this is not a fun park. This is not a place in which you enter and you forget. You have to. We use that to try to create that critical thinking on where they are and what are we going to talk about. So I think it's needed a combination of traditional methods, literature, other kind of information, plus something that is attractive to them, because if we don't make them to be attracted by that, they are not going to approach to those issues that for them are all things, you know. But it's difficult, yeah, it is.
I think that this is definitely a very complex question, but I think we can't undervalue their skills. I can just bring a very simple example. As a fact checker, I can spend hours just finding where this picture coming from and everything, and I'm just trying to find the primary sources. And my daughter, who is 11 years old, passes by and like, AI, or like, this is edited. I was like, how do you know? Oh, because that's a very popular filter on a Snapchat last week. And I just simply have not this knowledge. So they do have a lot of skills, which sometimes we are not coping with them. That's the first thing. But we also shouldn't devalue the very important state of mind, which is called boring. They coming back with such a great ideas when they are bored. That's the other side that we as teachers, as educators, sometimes as parents, we are scared by death to make them bored. And we shouldn't. And this is one of the things that, for example, in our museum, Territory of Terror, we are leaving them in a white, like, thinking room, reflection room. It's just a white room with some pictures, very old school, and some of them just seeing those pictures first time in their life, those printed black and white. And just giving them space without gadgets brings up very interesting ideas from them. So it's definitely a combination, and we should somehow find that, create the space for it. You know that this year Oxford and Cambridge forbidden any tests. That we are back to writing essays without gadgets. We are back to old school, like very before digital forms. And in Ukraine, it's a very specific situation because all of a sudden the book appeared to be this pre-digital gadget which is not dependent on electricity cuts. So when you're in a bomb shelter, book is your best friend because you don't need to save the battery for it, because you need to save it for other stuff, and you can just, you know, escape a bit in this imaginary world which is as now like the only known creative development for any kid is just to read and flow freely in it.
Thank you, Olga.
I wanted to make at first some general statements to the German case, because in Germany at the moment, as I'm talking about the GDR history, there's no professorship for GDR history, and these professors who are teaching teachers, the teachers are giving their information on to the students, and so we have now a lack of information about the GDR in the youth in Germany, and less informations are about that. They maybe they know who was Erich Honecker, but they don't know the prominent people from the peaceful revolution who were making this revolution in GDR. They don't know the names and something like this. This is a case we are working with, and additionally there are these fake news, this informations on the internet, AI-generated pictures and stuff like this, and the children talking to their grandmothers and mothers at the kitchen table, which the parents made very bad, sometimes very bad experience after the fall of the wall. They experienced no work and is insecurity, and the picture of the GDR is getting more positive and more positive. And our answer to this is the original material from our archive to put this against this narration. And maybe I can give some examples from projects we are working with. We invite the young people to our, obviously we invite the teachers, they bring the young people to our archive, and we are working with them. They are working with the materials from our archive. They are working with some Istat publications from the GDR and learn to how this opposition work was done. And it is not a theoretical work, it's very practical. So the things were printed and the paper was organized somehow. And afterwards, after they hear the story, they are printing their own Samizdat publications and learn how to print their own thing. Another project is that they are also working with materials from the peaceful revolution and learn this change of the social change start with an individual person, and your voice does matter in this protest. It starts not with this whole demonstration, but with one person who is brave and courage. And afterwards, with this experience, they go to a politician and make with him an interview, so that they get to know these politicians and find some kind of trust in the political establishment, maybe again. So, for example, this.
Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just try to help. Oh yeah. Regarding other approaches, what was your answer? I'd like to provide, definite answer, but unfortunately I'm not teacher, not educator. So from my archaeological perspective and, talks and with young generation during VR presentation. And I need to point out that I don't think that virtual reality saves everything, of course. Yeah, in ideal world, we have kind of the, complex program and several approaches or tools. They support each other, and they help to highlight or different aspects. But I still I don't know how to encourage young generation to read more, for example. But this is also a question what to read. So I can imagine if it's something is written shortly, in attractive way, yeah, I think there is the room to read. But when I imagine if you know, I mentioned Hannah Arendt, the book is something like this. It's very hard to read, so nobody will understand. So they are definitely different formats, and yeah. And of course, parallel, I talk about virtual reality, so if I focus on technology, right? So the problem with technology is still a step forward. We have lots of tools, but the content is missing. And we all have, I suppose, we are placed in humanities area, philosophical faculty, definitely humanities. So there is the gap, because we are not experts in technology, but we still should think how to use technology. So for example, currently, it's very simple, for example, to create short videos. Then during watching the video, you can make decision. You can decide what to do. For example, in complicated situation like in history. So this is something what we are thinking right now in Prague, how to create this tool. And this is the other way. For example, some stories during, Nazi occupation, and then to experience what the normal people in every day and simulate the situation, then encourage, so decide what was your decision and explain the consequences. So this is should be very simple tool, for example, and one of the pathway for upcoming years. So if it was helpful.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting, and I guess it's a call for educators and teachers to think about the content that could be applied in all these mechanisms. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I guess the question is then meeting the young people where they are, right? So that would mean actually probably going into all of those social media spaces that they inhabit until we find an effective way how to get rid of all of that. But so meeting them at TikTok or meeting them at these devices where they actually come in contact with these ideas. And the other thing I guess that is really important to think about is precisely not to, even though we would like to dwell on facts and we would like to encourage people to learn basics of what happened in the past, but it might go into the danger of reifying the past and basically telling them, and this is what totalitarianism looks like, and this is what authoritarianism always will look like, when actually they are now probably, watching TikTok videos of future authoritarians who are already reaching them with authoritarian propaganda. And despite having, some formal education about what authoritarianism was like and what are gulags and what are concentration camps, they do not recognize the propaganda that is being actually delivered to them into their phones hour by hour, day by day. So we are failing them in some way, and we are failing them not by not delivering the facts of history, but by not delivering them the tools of recognizing authoritarian propaganda in its newer forms, allowed for by the affordances of newer technological devices.
Thank you very much, though it's not very optimistic what you're saying. Cecilia, would you like to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to maybe connect a bit what we said on different ways to engage with the younger generations. We noticed over the past years working with many students that what we should try to do is to create a form of active remembrance for them. Mm-hmm. Indeed, not under evaluating their skills, but actually using them. In some of our projects, for example, we, well, just for context, we organize a series of exchanges across Europe in different remembrance sites. So 4 days where the students that are students or not, youngsters that are interested can join the exchange, visit specific remembrance sites, usually crossing a border, so connecting stories. We always, when we design the program, allow time for them to visit the remembrance sites, of course, learn, but also meeting with the guides, and also we allow some time for them to think about what they've seen and also elaborate and create content. So we usually also include time for a training where how to turn stories into podcast episodes. They go around interview guides, for example, or creating videos. And you would be surprised by the quality of, in such a short time that they have to create a video about a story or a remembrance site, the quality that they really deliver. So for us, we are trying really to focus to think about these youngsters as actors in the remembrance. And that's also why we are trying to create, we're working with partners to create a youth ambassador network, because we would like to hear more and more what they think remembrance should look like. So instead of having a top-down approach where we say, oh, we should do this, this, and that, to ask them, the younger generation, what they would like to learn and how. So it's a working process, and it's, of course, a lot of talking and dialogue. But yeah, we are starting on this.
Thank you very much. That makes sense. So I suggest we open the floor, and I can already see some hands. So please help me, my friends from INRS.
Thank you very much. Dagmara Mańka-Wizor from the Museum of the History of Polish Jews. Actually, I don't have a question. There is just one thing I think is extremely important, and we should highlight it and repeat as much as possible. I want to share my extreme, never-ending admiration and gratitude toward Dr. Olga Mukha and other colleagues from Ukraine, because I strongly believe there is no bigger threat and challenges that were in Ukraine, not only for you, but for all of us. And I feel always very impressed, even by the fact that you came here, because it's way more complicated than for any of us. But also, the fact that in these realities, you're still keeping your priorities, your paradigms, your mission. And it's not only for you, but it's for us and for our humanity, for our future. So thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Yeah, thank you very much. And, you know, to be honest, one of the biggest challenge for us at the very beginning, back in 2022, was that we as Museum Territory of Terror, we were as no one else prepared, because we knew how it works, but it's very difficult to apply to yourself. And I genuinely wish everyone here for you to learn from our experience now, not ever having your own, really. It will apply some misinterpretations. Obviously, it's a different point of view, but this is better to learn from someone else. And one of the biggest challenges was also to preserve us in our work, because we were very well prepared. So the city council was quite pushy first year, like, why don't you switch to the refugee hub? And pushing back and saying, we want to be museum, we want to do our job, was probably one of the most extremely challenging, also from the ethical perspective, right? Because everyone like, oh, if they're shelling, what kind of museum, right? So we started to do those things with, hosting other museums, asking hiding other archives, collections, everything, right? And the other thing that was this big discussion on oral history, because oral history requires distance, and we are operating in this shady area sometimes in between of oral history and documenting the war. And this also amplifies some methodological differences. But then I think that the third thing, I've shown you those pictures of Odessa Art Museum, which was shelled just before we were in negotiation of opening the exhibition. And you know what was that? Then I've decided to cut half of the cost for exhibition itself, and we repainted the whole second floor. So we cut the exhibition, but we tried to help to fix the museum. And that it came into the moment when USAID cut the costs as well, and they were one of the sponsors. And I had the most ridiculous conversation in my life when they were like, we are not giving you costs anymore, so you are not opening the exhibition. And I was like, why? My exhibition is about non-violent resistance in occupied territories. If those people can, how, this is our responsibility. So that was just open call and very honest conversation with the team. And I said, I understand everyone who can't afford, because now we have no cost, we are volunteering, we are investing our time, money, whatever, and 90% state. And that was what is, and the thing that we can't take it for granted, that somehow Ukraine is still fighting back. We are all sick from the word of resilience. Really, whoever talk about resilience, we are like, just don't get us started. It's 4 years of protecting on a daily basis. This anxiety, it's a foundation of our life. There's, not sleeping, overeating. You buy snacks for movie, we buy snacks for shelling. Really. That there's projection that tonight going to be a shelling, so you go to the supermarket and buy you something nice, at least to overcompensate this bit, right? So this is a very complex matter, and I'm very grateful for recognizing this. And I think that's the best thing what European Museum on a different level, personal, institutional, states, is just to try to support it the way to be heard and also to learn from, cooperate with our museums, host the exhibitions, right? And for us now, the main challenge is human. There are 2 men stayed in our museums. One is over 70, and the other is very sick. All the other are on the front line. We are a female-only society in museum, mostly, right? And we can't keep our people staying in profession. They are, most of them, a lot of them are refugees, and they're doing very basic jobs they are not being trained for or educated for. One of our curators, they just work in hospitality somewhere in the UK, someone work somewhere else, and this is one of the most devastating and damaging experience indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank you. I'm Patrick. I would like to appreciate the presentation of Sebastian, namely that he said that archives are very important for the reconstruction of remembrance and history, etc., and fighting to mistakes, etc. And also I appreciate Olha and Lukáš presentations. They spoke about the importance of looking for facts. So we know that the Soviet historiography was built for more than 7 decades as Sovietic, as international, based on Marxism, Leninism, etc. And my first question would be for Olha. Olha, now or in the last 10 years, how do you evaluate the opinions, let's say, of last objective Russian historians of the change of these paradigms against the Ukrainians as fascists, as Nazis, as Banderas, etc. And also how you in Ukraine are you defending against these attacks to let's say, rewrite history of the last decade of the together life with Russia, etc. And a question also for Sebastian, you know, of course, coming from Berlin, that during the first days after the fall of wall, was a lot of files of state security, Stasi, destroyed by throwing, etc. How did you, in Germany, succeed to reconstruct the files just to be renewed archives documents for the looking for the facts? Thank you.
Was the question how we preserve the files? Are they reconstructed now, or what? So at first, after the fall of the war, it was a civil society which were gathering this. There were building committees who were going to the Stasi records, to the Stasi, and say we have to preserve this story because we want to preserve this story from the above, but we also want to document the story from the bottom to have the corrective to the state view of the story. And afterwards there was a law for the Stasi records, and it was also it was not part of the state's record archive. The Stasi records archive was their own institution making the form for the remembrance work. And they are reconstructing the papers already, as they right now, as it's going on reconstructing these papers. So sorry, maybe we can afterwards talk about it.
Thank you for your question, because this is probably one of those words which started from the fake historical narrative, right? We remember this historical essay of Putin of Ukraine being an artificial state created by Lenin. That was the most hilarious story I ever heard. But I want to remind you that I'm myself a post-Soviet kid. I was born in Soviet times, and I'm trained to live in this Orwellian reality of double speaking as well. And we were talking yesterday about peace, right? And then we were talking that we need to understand that for Russia and for some of the under this influence, that peace means something totally different than for the Westerns. Peace is a war against everyone to preserve our peace inside. This is how it functions. And this is why all those peace talks and everything, those are just the theater of, and this is why we are all like very hesitant over this word. But I think that Ukraine shouldn't rewrite things as a narrative. Ukraine, and also that it's just to highlight, to name spade a spade. I had a big discussion, for example, with the director of Anne Frank Museum in Amsterdam, one of the most visited, and all the Dutch kids are going there and they build in there, imagine on that. And here is one simple historical fact stated, and then Russians deliberated Auschwitz. I was like, how dare you? Those were not Russians. There was Soviet Army, Red Army. To be precise, there was the first Ukrainian front of the Soviet Army. And the director was like, that's too complicated. We ran a marketing research with our main target audience, and they found it too complicated. I was like, excuse me, who is your main target? Kids, because they don't know what is Red Army or Soviet Army and how they will ever know. And she's like, that's too much of detail. And my strong position is that history without detail, this is what is called propaganda. This is how you can manipulate it. And this is how us, as creating all those different tools, just naming spade the spade and finding and verifying those facts with the locals. Because there was also a big problem at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion that all the experts on Ukraine were trained in Moscow. Most of the journalists were trained in Moscow, so they had very deep expertise, right? So, and it applies not for Ukraine only. It's applied to everyone. One of the painful points of mine is so-called Slavic studies all around the world. And when I'm asking my colleagues after Slavic studies from Oxford, what do you know about Slovak culture or Slovene? Do you even recognize them? But they do recognize Dostoevsky, even if they never read it, that they know about, right? They know Dostoevsky, they know Chekhov, and they are after Slavic studies, they are in favor of big Russian culture. They have no idea about beautiful Polish literature, classic modern literature. They have no idea about Czech film. They know nothing. And do we need to rewrite it? No, we just need to find a balance. It's not about even cancellation. It's just to give everyone proper space they deserve. So it's not about protecting and, counter-narratives. It's about let's all of us, and he just applied for everything, including this, especially disinformation and propaganda. Let's find our way, and now we have plenty of, to go to the primary sources and look in the proper balance. Pretty simple, but very challenging to achieve. Thank you.
Hello? It's working? Oh, okay, now it's working. Aleksander Sławiński from Dulag 121 Museum in Pruszków, close to Warsaw. I have one comment and one question. So first the comment. So you were asking how we can encourage kids to learn about the historical truth or how to interest them in history. So I think that the best way is to let them do it in their own way. So, for instance, in our museum, we organize lessons, which and the final of these lessons is encouraging them to make a project how they would promote this story we are teaching them about. And they have really great, fantastic ideas sometimes. And the youngest, like maybe 12, 13 years old, they understand this modern humor, they understand modern trends. So sometimes I don't even understand why that's cool, but they know. So maybe you should employ them to promote historical knowledge. And now the question. So a lot of beautiful words have been said about that we should counter-effect disinformation, propaganda, fake news, and so on. But the reality is that it works so well and disinformation is so spread around because it's profitable, because these big platforms, big tech companies, they gain from the fact that propaganda and fake news generate more emotions, and more emotions equals to more money, more clicks. So my question is, how would you regulate the social media market nowadays? What kind of propositions, what kind of ideas do you have to regulate social media and internet as such on at least European level? Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure we have lawyers.
I am.
Oh, great. But
yeah, I'm surprisingly master of law. And well, that's a very big question that everyone is fighting on. And there are two paths. First, it's yes, state is obliged to do, but let's not forget that people are going to find a way around that. In the UK, we just tried to ban social media for minors, right? What they done? They just created alternative. That's it, right? So one thing is the protection. And for example, one of the successful stories, it's how the composers, right, are protected using AI tools. The successful story for music and not yet successful for writers, because copyright is open discussion, right? And in the UK, the Association of Publishers are really fighting very hard on it, just to find the proper way for remuneration, because it's not going to be the way to just protect it fully, but at least that should be the fair trade, right? But on the other side, I think that we also don't have time to wait until state will decide and do something in the perfect world. So I think that skills and building skills is essential. Building those skills, how to protect yourself, and especially among young people, right? And like I was running the research for BBC World few months ago, and that was very interesting to compare different markets. And kids in Ukraine were way more skilled in recognizing propaganda just because they have to. That's a survival skill. And some of them were also following the Russian propaganda channels. And I was like, why do you? And we compare what those say, what BBC say, what Russian propagandists say, and then we are making our own decision. Kids in the UK were way less because they don't need to as well. And this is where this is low-hanging fruit for Tommy Robinson and other guys with Manosphere and other marketing products coming. And I think the school should take responsibility, because now a lot of governments are talking about the media literacy for university, for people. It should start from school. They have their gadgets in hand, sometimes before they start walking. So this should start there. And building those skills is possible. It's overwhelming a bit for us who lived out through all those changes of digitalized era. But for those who are native with it, it's so natural. As for me, after post-Soviet, reading among the quotes of Lenin and Marx and everything, and then still finding out what Nietzsche said, because I had no other sources, right? So for them, it's also possible. And those are two paths which we need to find how to meet in between. The state should absolutely think about that, but in a reality, not being scared, but in acceptance. This already here, especially big AI models which are using. And on the other side is like how to build those skills also for ourselves, because we can't also afford it, right? When you start Googling and check in, and there are already some tools for disinformation qualification, but it needs constant work that becomes separate work itself. So it's a very tricky in between of simplifying, but still finding ways, and I believe that quite a lot of people here are already doing and adding their input to this path.
Thank you very much. Yes. Markus Meckel in front. Oh, okay. Right.
My name is Albert Nicola. I come from Albania, and I am together here with my colleagues Altin Hoxha and Sofinoti. And we represent the Albanian Authority for Information on Secret Files of the communist regime in the country. I truly appreciate all of your representations, but especially that of Dr. Holata from Czech Republic. And my question is this: does your institution cope with the totalitarian period of Czechoslovakia, or is there any extension to the other communist regimes in ex-communist countries? Because it will be really interesting for our institution in Albania to establish a connection with you, because one of the pillars, most important pillars of our activity is that of education. And I think that really running your experience would be very, very important to us for our everyday job in the country. And the last, I would like to mention a fact that recently I published a book in Italy about the question of the impact of the movement of '68 in Albania. And one of the most interesting and wonderful example was that of Czechoslovakia, the debates between Milan Kundera and Václav Havel. And they gave really a great example for all the other ex-communist countries. So I think your country has many, many to teach to us. So thank you very much, and that's it.
Thank you very much. For appreciation. I need to admit that here on this place is sometimes very hard to understand because sound is. If anybody can help me with translating the question. You mean our... Yeah. I more or less have the first questions. Thank you very much. If you are asking on the Institution for the Study of Totalitarian Regime, I'm relatively new there, but I'm pretty sure that we are not focusing only on Czech Republic or previous Czechoslovakia, but they are experts. Also, more generally, and also, if you were here yesterday, I presented the project Czechoslovaks in Gulag from Adam Hradilek, Jan Dvořák, and other guys, and encouraging other potential partner that the project Czechoslovak in Gulags is now focused not only Czechoslovaks, but other nations, especially in Central Europe, but other nations in Europe. So we are not exclusively focused on Czech Republic. And there were second questions, right? Do you know it? Can you please repeat the second question?
May I repeat the question?
Or maybe that's enough. Or
yes. Yes, the second part of it, given that one of the pillars, most important pillars of our activity is that of education. Mm. And it would be interesting for us to build a connection with your institution, to know about your experience that you presented here today. That was a very simple question.
Yeah, of course. I think that's why we are here. So if we can meet after and email or anything. So absolutely no problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Markus Meckel is my name. I have a question to Iratxe from Spain. I think it is the special case that in 1975 there was a decision not to deal with past in order to protect the new democracy. I think this was the special thing in Spain, that to protect the democratic development against dealing with that past, with that terrible past of dictatorship of Franco, and push it away in order to win the people for a democratic development. And that's why in Spain all these new dealing is only during the last 20-25 years starting. That's why my question to you is, what do you think that as we in Germany after 1989 we immediately started with dealing with communist past and dictatorship in order to strengthen democratic development. But the idea in Spain at first was the opposite. Can you tell us a little bit about your own experiences with that linkage of dealing with past, Aufarbeitung of past on the one hand, or is it better to include people, or so-called, for democratic development without dealing with past?
What is better, I couldn't say. I think in both cases is what the reality allows you to do, you know. In Spain, the reality was that for so many years there was complete silence, that then people wanted to start living and doing other things, and the thing of memory was not the first things to do for most of the people, you know. We always see Germany as one of the examples of how to do just directly after what it happened. But it's not easy because sometimes some people perhaps want, but the society in general sometimes needs time to recover from that, to look to it from another angle and from another perspective. That for that you need time, but you have to the risk of if many time pass, they forget. So, what is the best? I don't know. I think. I cannot tell you. We always see as Germany as one of the examples of things that they were done well, quite in deep and directly. And what it happened in Spain is not the best case of what to do, because so many years pass, and especially on the curriculum, because nowadays it's difficult to start dealing with that past when there are many other issues or many other themes, you know. So what to do? I think there are, in all the countries, there are symbolic moments in which that flame of remembrance starts. For example, in Gernika, in 1987, with the visit of Petra Kelly, a deputy of the Green Party, saying, I am German, I'm ashamed of what we did. It was the start for many people in the society to say, okay, if those Germans that they bomb us say that, we should do something, you know. So, but you never know. Each country is so different that, yeah, there is no one answer for that.
Yeah, hello, I'm Dovilė Budrytė from Georgia Gwinnett College and also Vytautas Magnus University. And my question is for Professor Pavol Hardoš. I very much enjoyed the presentation. I enjoyed all of the presentations for this panel. But it seems to me that your work allows us to put the case study of Central and Eastern Europe into a broader global perspective. And that's what we tried to do, I think, with the opening session yesterday when we were thinking about the ways to how to put our region into a broader perspective. And my question is this: could you elaborate a little bit on how Central and Eastern European victimhood nationalism is related to conspiracy theories? Because in the United States, there are plenty of conspiracy theories, right? The United States, I mean, you know, if you look at the dominant narrative, it considers to be, exclusive nation, et cetera, et cetera. So victimhood is very different there, right? So how is victimhood nationalism and conspiracy, this intersection, how is it different in the region of Central and Eastern Europe?
Thank you. And I'm sorry I missed yesterday's session. So the idea is, of course, that conspiracy theories are everywhere, and in every country they will have some form, right? That you will have conspiracy narratives taking different shapes in the United States, precisely because of the underlying social condition, the underlying political reality, underlying experiences, and so on. So conspiracy narratives will basically accommodate the culture in which they are spread. So the idea of victimhood nationalism is basically that precisely in smaller nations, smaller countries that have experienced historical injustices, these past injustices are sort of like well known, like they are part of the national consciousness. They are part of the things that everybody sort of like learns from their mother's milk. And having this cultural knowledge, having this background of all of the sort of historical past injustices about how we have been betrayed by whom, when were we defeated by whom, when we were subjugated by whom, and sort of like they don't even have to be necessarily taught in schools, but they are somehow repeated as this common sense historical knowledge about everybody who is a member of this nation knows what it means. These particular narratives can inform the conspiracy theories in the sense that the incoming or the formulated conspiracy theories will utilize these sort of stories. They will utilize them. You can think of it. My colleague in my the colleague in our project, anthropologist Alžběta Draškevič, had this very wonderful analogy. All of these stories from history, you know, they serve like the cutlery in your cupboard, right? You open the cutlery and open the cupboard and you open the shelves and there is all sorts of neat things like that we sort of take for granted because they're always there, and we can sort of like, okay, we can always get into the cupboard and pick out the tool that we need. And history often serves like this, that you tell a story about some evildoers harming the nation nowadays, and you can pick these from the ready-made historical narratives to use them as an analogy to bolster your story now. And you know, this might remind you of all of the things that have been done to us in the past. You don't even have to be explicit about it, right? You just have to basically produce a story that depicts us as victims again, right? And you can just sort of like go into the already potent stories that are already present in the consciousness of people. So this is the connection I would see as the most potent one, that all of the stories that we talk about and we sort of repeat them and we talk about them and again are of course important, right? That they are important parts of our memory of who we are and where we came from. But at the same time, these narratives or these analogies can be used for evil as well, right? They can be used by propagandists, by illiberal politicians for their own purposes, to construct today's imagined enemies as analogous to the previous ones who have somehow harmed the nation in the past, and that we are again somehow being threatened by invisible foes, and that this triggers this remembrance and anxiety and the need for some sort of political action. And that is precisely why these stories are told as mobilizing devices, as identity-forming devices, as devices that are meant for that particular political community to pull up the banisters and raise the shields and again go into battle that somehow is revisiting previous battles and previous injustices, even though these injustices today are mostly imagined or fictitious or fantastical. Nevertheless, they are made believable precisely by the experiences that have been sort of put into our collective consciousness. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
So, last question, I believe.
Yes, I will present. Ja by som poprosila pana Hardoša.
I would like to ask Mr. Hardoš if you can translate and interpret the question. Well, currently we are in institutional talks, and also we have discussed the history and historical messages that many of us experienced.
About history and how the certain memories and odkazy, okay, certain practices and certain ways of talking about history have been discussed. Yes, sorry.
Myslím si, že aj vy vlastne,
And I think you, who are currently in the panel, have the information, historical information, through references or referenced information.
And then we are sitting here, we have some maybe you can continue, because I have no idea where this is going.
Tak, reference.
Okay, so the historical references, but maybe move on to the question.
No, chcem povedať, stále sme sa nedotkli vlastne...
Still, we have not touched the core. Who is relaying these information for the historical memory? And that are the direct participants of those historical events who are now experiencing something similar in Gaza or other parts of the world where something evil is happening. And they are experiencing it again because sometimes they return back to these places. And they go there, endangering themselves, and make footage that creates, again, to create a fond of human memories and remembrances that will speak about the history and will be recorded in the museums or other institutions.
Neglected is basically the people who are basically creating the memories and creating the artifacts, creating the basis of knowledge today that can again be used by us in the future, right? That there are today people who go to Gaza or who go to Ukraine or who come from there and bear witness, right? And they bear witness and create the artifacts that can then be used by future museums or future exhibitions that create these memories, these important voices, and that these voices should be, I'm assuming, part of the discussion as well. Čiže vravíte, že aby sme vlastne reflektovali na tieto hlasy.
So we should reflect the authentic participant that at cost of endangering their own lives are entering the conflict zones.
On the people who are currently undergoing the danger, the life-threatening situations, that they go and bear witness and collect evidence for us. Áno.
A preto si myslím, že prevzdelávanie.
And that's why I think re-educating and amplifying the education of children should be done in participation with the people who are authentically experiencing the state of the world, so they have authentic contact, for example, through meetings, festivals, documentaries that are focused on these topics.
Meetings with people who have experienced this in the past and or who are currently experiencing, who are bearing witness to various evils of authoritarianism and war. So that this is done through discussions and meetings in person of people who are authentically have been involved or have seen evil things happening.
I'm sorry, but we have run out of time, so we need to just
maybe last sentence, poslednú vetu, ak máte, lebo musíme, že ak máte ešte poslednú vetu, alebo
maybe the last sentence. Do you have a question? I would like to point out that the literature, film crews, music, art is the most authentic expression of the history and towards the memory.
Most important and most still memorable and effective are the artifacts created by the people, either through movie or film or documentaries or art that still today talk to us. Thank you. Ďakujem.
Would you like very briefly to comment on that?
Yeah, just very short comment that this is exactly what we are doing in documenting Ukraine and wounded culture and other projects. The only thing is that you wouldn't imagine how many of people we record in their testimonies and interviews, roughly almost half saying this is you can only publicly use when everything ends. And this is a very important moment to take into account because this is a protection of personal data, but also a lot of them, because I worked with the TOT, the temporarily occupied territories, this is a very, very delicate topic. A lot of them have relatives, their friends, their property, their people linked. So this is a very, very difficult to navigate in between of telling their story, but not releasing something what can possibly affect them or people linked with them. But this is a very important part, and I think that also you here in all the European countries, if you can do those documenting from the refugees which are here as well. That would be also very, very important archival knowledge to be used in the future when it's safe, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Big applause to Iratxe, Olha, Cecilia, Pavol, Lukáš, and Sebastian.